Coogs House, the Big 12 may have done away with their official media poll, but that didn't stop the experts at Locked On Podcast Network from making one of their own. So where do the Houston Cougars fit in?
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, the daily podcast all about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. Whether a Houston fan or just a hater can step by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Appreciate making us your first listen each and every day as the everyday that you are. If you want to join the conversation but you don't know what to say, you're not alone, because I, like many people right now, thoughts, prayers, everything for Central Texas, and the tragedy feels too small a word for everything happening there in Kerrville and the surrounding Central Texas hill country. Obviously, if you've chosen Locked On Cougs as a distraction for the day, we appreciate it. If you're getting to us late because you were caught up dealing with any of that, obviously, thoughts and prayers to you and yours. I hope we can talk through some sports and distract some from the chaos of the world. But it's been pretty heavy all weekend. And so I appreciate getting to talk about the Cougs all day, every day, to anyone wanting to listen. And I appreciate you listening in a time when you may need something else. So let's move into the first segment. I'll talk some about the Locked On poll. I want to talk some about other Big 12 polls that are out there right now. And then I'll talk about what positioning in the polls may look like. So moving on, there's no easy way to transition out of that. Locked On, and shouts to Christian Rao for his work on helping orchestrate this. After the Big 12 decided there was not going to be a media poll, the Locked On experts said, hey, we're smart enough. We represent the 12, or we represent the 12. We represent the Big 12 in a lot of different ways. We can do our own poll. And everyone cast their ballots and made one. We had 15 schools represented. We do not presently have a Locked On Cincinnati Bearcats host. That's actually still, if you know someone, let's work on it. And we also have Drake Toll, who does the Big 12 show. I think Spencer McLaughlin was reached out to. He does Locked On College Football. Anyway, our poll came out as follows. We have, for the visual audience, they can see it. For the audio audience, the Locked On Sun Devils. Arizona State was first. Kansas State second. Texas Tech third. Baylor fourth. Iowa State fifth. BYU Cougars sixth. TCU seventh. Utah eighth. Kansas ninth. Colorado 10th, the Houston Cougars, your Houston Cougars 11th, Oklahoma State 12th, West Virginia 13, Cincinnati 14, Central Florida 15, and Arizona 16. Now, honestly, this was kind of impromptu and orchestrated in a way to kind of make sure that we had some sort of a poll, and much like the media poll for the Big 12 had typically had like experts from every program, right? We had our experts from every program vote. And listen, I don't think that I don't know if I can call us all experts anymore after looking at this. There's a lot of problems I've got with this. I cannot believe that some of these programs they have ahead of Houston, it feels like name brand and name recognition alone. Utah being up there. BYU has no quarterback and they're up at sixth. I just don't get it a lot of the way across here as my fellow compadres put this together. Now, full disclosure, someone voted Houston first. I don't know who that was. Someone voted Houston first. And while that admittedly might have been a little high, it wasn't anywhere near. Like Arizona had 7 first place votes. Kansas State and Texas Tech each had 3 first place votes. BYU had a first place vote. And I hope that first place vote for BYU came before the Red Slough news was official. I say that to say that voting Houston first for whoever might have done that in the Big 12 poll on the Locked On Podcast Network was probably in an effort just to pull it up, because Houston, honestly, sitting here at 11th, really just tells me that a lot of people don't understand exactly the amount of turnover that Houston had across the board here. Houston will be better at every position group next year. Quarterback, bring in Conner Weigman. Running back, as good as Rashawn Stanford was, they got deeper by bringing in Dean Connors. Receivers, you've got Boogie Johnson. You also have Mekhi Muse, but you also have like Kobe Young is growing. You bring in tight end Tanner Kojol. Offensive line, brought in 6 guys, 5 of whom have Power 4 experience already. The defense brought in guys at every single level. Jesus Machado, you bring out Corey Platt. Yes, you lost 2 big-time DBs, but that does not, to me, warrant a team here being ranked behind 3 teams they beat last year in Utah, Kansas State, and TCU. I don't know where some of the love for some of these programs is coming from necessarily. And I think it's interesting that people in the Locked On Podcast Network had Arizona State as high as they did. Again, receiving 7 first-place votes and being up there at number 1 feels wild to me. I don't think anyone it looked like had them below 3rd. Arizona State won a bunch of one-score close games last year. Arizona State also had, for my money, the 2nd-best player in the conference last year. I look at Arizona State last year like, man, that was a cool story. This implies something different. We have almost half of the people voting put Arizona State in their top spot. Kansas State, I actually kind of get. Even though Houston beat them last year, they have the high-ranked returning quarterback. They have been in the Big 12 championship game a couple times in the last 5 years. Great coach, hard place to play, so they're going to win their home games. Texas Tech and Baylor, I go back and forth on. Full disclosure, I didn't put Texas Tech first. But one of the biggest things holding me back from putting Texas Tech first was, and I hate to say this because I kind of hate it when other people do it to Houston, it was legitimately just a logo on the helmet. I feel like a lot of times in my 34 years on earth, we've had Texas Tech as like gonna turn the corner this year and whatever. You're gonna hear about that all the time, and then they don't, right? Whether it's they have the big win over Texas of Crabtree going up the sideline or whatever, they then turn around and flop one to Oklahoma, or I don't insert your guess. It just feels like Texas Tech as a brand has had trouble getting over that hump. McGuire hasn't won more than 9 games in a season yet while he's been there. I'm supposed to be trusting Baron Morton in this sense. Like, I had a hard time with even as much money and roster improvement as Texas Tech has been spending and looking to do. I had a hard time putting Texas Tech over that hump. Baylor, I think they have a top-tier quarterback, one of the best returning quarterbacks, frankly, in America, little in the conference. I say returning quarterbacks. But I don't know if that's enough to put them over the hump there. Meanwhile, like Iowa State, I feel like my comrades put a little low here at 5. I don't know why, and maybe it's because the Farmageddon game happens early this year. I think it happens like week 0. And it's either week 0 or week 1, but it's over in Ireland. I don't see that one either. Houston, though, being, even with someone having voted them number 1 overall, whoever that person might be, Houston being as low as 11th does not make sense to me. They're not in the same tier and category and stratosphere as Oklahoma State, who had to revamp their entire coaching staff to try and save Mike Gundy's job, or Rich Rod's round 2 with West Virginia. I just don't. Scott Frost, UCF, has come back for the round as well. I just don't see Houston being in that category. I feel like they're at least up in that 5, 6, 7 range. I think Houston's the kind of team where you saw them get better at every single position group over the offseason. They, based on previous season win percentage, have an easier schedule this year than they did last year by leaps and bounds. It's year 2 with Fritz. The culture is more set up. And even so Conner Weigman's big problem is he's injury prone at quarterback. Even if he goes down, Zion Chris comes in and he led you to 3 conference wins a year ago that you probably weren't supposed to win on paper, but they won anyway. And if it's not Zion Chris, it's Austin Carlisle, who's electrically fast, like a crazy runner. And I don't think people putting Houston that low are actually paying any attention, which makes me question some of the expertise of a lot of this. But we'll prove all of them wrong. We'll prove other people wrong as well. I want to talk about some other polls going around nationally in a second as well, in lieu of Big 12 media polls. Before we get too far, today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at Game Time. Now, listen, if you ever decide to last minute to go to the ball game, the concert's coming through, whatever the last minute ticket is in town, it's game day, you realize you want to be in the stands, that's exactly where Game Time comes in to help you out. It's the easy way to grab last minute tickets without all of the stress. The money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food at the ballpark. I love food at a ballpark, extra drinks, whatever the case may be, even merch at a concert. Invite more people. Game Time makes all of that possible. Seat views from the app, you can see exactly what's going to look like in that venue for the type of event from your section and row. Last minute tickets and zone deals can save up to 10% in the last few moments before the event starts. Listen, this is the best place to get in on the action this summer and get into the game, into the concert, into the show yourself. Take this work out of buying tickets with Game Time down the Game Time app. Create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute, lowest prices guaranteed. Park Rangers Locked On Coogs here, talking preseason polls, and it is awkward that there was no official Big 12 media poll. I talked before about how I actually think this might be a savvy move, and I said as someone who got to vote in it the last couple of seasons since Houston joined the Big 12. At the point of the media poll was you had experts from every single locale theoretically laying out what they saw the conference being like, and you hope that in balancing that out with experts from every single area, that you theoretically would have some sort of a consensus. And for what it's worth, they were arduous if you were going to do them like actually detailed and actually think through each team and all that. And it took some time to go through and all that. And also, I think that the Big 12 is looking at like, hey, the narrative a year ago was Arizona State came out of nowhere from 16th and up and won the conference. And while I think personally Houston could also, do that this year, potentially not going to be as low as 16th if there was one. I think that actually kind of hurt the Big 12 in a lot of ways last year, and that people thought of, well, if Arizona State can come out of nowhere and win the conference, what does it tell you about the conference? Right? But doing away with the Big 12 media poll meant that our options as far as looking at the conference come down to things like the Phil Steele, the Athlon, ESPN did an FPI poll. We're going to talk about each of those in a second. But I should point out that each of these are not done the same way. The Big 12 media poll was done by looking at each and every single person or like representative of the conference. These are not done that completely. And so when I look at like the Steele media poll, the Steele poll, he had Arizona State, Kansas State, Baylor, BYU as his top four. Texas Tech in fifth, TCU and Iowa State rounding it out sixth and seventh. His next tier of sorts was Utah, Kansas, Colorado, Houston at 11, West Virginia, and Cincinnati and West Virginia at 12 and 13. At the bottom of the conference, he had UCF, Arizona, and Oklahoma State. I got problems with that one as well. I don't see Houston behind a Colorado team that doesn't know who their quarterback is. I don't see Houston behind a Utah team that they beat a year ago when Houston got better. I would say at least as much as far as percentages of raises and whatever it goes as Utah did. I don't know why TCU is in his first tier. I don't know why BYU is fourth. I don't know. Athlon had Kansas State in first place in the conference. That's one I at least can get on board with, although Houston upset them a year ago as well. Arizona State second, Texas Tech, Iowa State, Baylor, Utah, Kansas, TCU, BYU, Colorado, Houston again at 11, Cincinnati, Oklahoma State, West Virginia, Arizona, UCF. ESPN is the worst one of these by far, and I appreciate a lot of things about the worldwide leader in sports, but they did this predictive measurement based on computers they called the FPI, and they had Kansas State, Arizona State, BYU, Kansas, TCU, Baylor, Texas Tech, UCF, Iowa State, Utah, Colorado, Cincinnati, West Virginia, Oklahoma State, Arizona, and someone missed. Oh, no, they had Houston dead last. I think that computer poll, as we look at like a bunch of different factors And like Houston pulling in a bunch of different transfers and things like that don't equate to the same kind of things for them. BYU is third in the ESPN FPI poll. That, again, is a computerized poll. It's not looking at the fact like they lost their starting quarterback. Across the board here, I come back to I'm not sure how Arizona. I mean, look, Sam Levitt's awesome. They returned the top receiver as well. I think Dillingham's a good coach. I get the positives there. I'm not saying they're going to be bad this year. I don't get why winning a bunch of one-score games a year ago and losing your best player, who I said in the first segment, I thought was the second best player in the conference last year in Cam Scatterbo, right? I don't get why the assumption is you're running it back. I understand how good they were last year. I also saw them win a bunch of one-score games last year. They weren't even a guarantee to get to the Big 12 championship game. And that took some, finagling and tie-breaking and whatever, right? I just don't. I don't know. I don't see how that works out like that necessarily. Kansas State, again, I think nationally, Kansas State feels probably like bridesmaid not a bride over and over again because people forget they won the conference the year TCU went to the college football playoff. TCU was just a one-loss team, and Kansas State was like a three-loss team, I want to say. I've said my piece on Baylor. All of these polls, though, seem to be underranking Houston, and I understand Steele and Athlon don't probably follow them as closely. They don't have the national brand recognition or whatever. ESPN did theirs all with technology and computers. But again and again and again, Houston gets pushed to the bottom. So I feel like this is a moment where you probably would argue that the media poll that they had would do Houston better than these other options, right? Because, yes, myself, but you could replace me with somebody else. That's fine. But Duarte, I imagine Monso got a vote. I imagine Gardner got a vote. I don't know if Yanez did or not. I should really ask him. But across the board, you'd had people voting in this poll that actually paid some attention to what Houston was doing. Because while you may not have Houston first in your poll at home, right, I do think that anyone who paid attention to what Houston was doing over the last 8 or 9 months would not have them in the bottom third of the conference, would not have them down there outside of the top 10. This is a team and a program that's like looking at like 6-6 as a floor. You're looking like, can they go 7-4 or 7-5? Can they go 8-4? Frankly, 9-3 might have a weird tiebreaker way to get you into the conference title game. Like, this feels like people are not following along, and I know it's not horribly new. It's not anything crazy or whatever, but I do think that it's worth looking at, like, what does it take? I mean, last year they knock off Kansas State and sort of spiral across the top of the conference, right? Last year they also beat Utah with a lot of fun, shut up those Utah fans. This year, as you look at their schedule, I actually think that they have a chance to do some of the same kind of things throughout the season. Opening the conference play with Colorado will be a fun way to do it as well. Colorado's a team that most people think is going to be, except for the ESPN poll, I guess, is in the same kind of class as Houston. So it'll be kind of a fun way to open things. We got Big 12 Media Days this week, and so I think we'll get to talk to some of the other Locked On folks and other people from across the conference as far as what they think about this. But on the whole, it just feels like my Locked On poll where, someone voted Houston 1 to try and pull them up, and we can talk about that later. But man, because if people aren't paying attention, that's the only reason that you can argue that Houston's as low as they've got them. I wonder, though, as we get to our third segment thought experiment, if that's an okay thing. Let's get into it 1 second. Park Rangers Locked On Coogs here. And as we've mentioned, whether it's our own Locked On poll having Houston at 11th, which is also what Steele and Athlon had. ESPN had them lower than that. The third segment thought experiment I've got for today is, Should Houston be okay with that? Is it better to be at the bottom of this poll? Again, the third segment thought experiment, if you want to have takes you want to get off or things you want to say in this, you can send the videos to Coogs pod, LOCOOGS pod, POD at gmail.com. Get your own third segment thought experiment of the show if you'd like. But I wonder if it's a good thing or a better thing to be at the bottom of this poll. Frankly, I look at last year's Big 12 media poll, which was more official, and Arizona State was at the bottom. Now, admittedly, part of that was because of the Big 12 media, how many people have been following Arizona State that closely, right? Arizona State was new to the conference. Even if you knew who Levitt was or Dillingham was, you might not have known who Scatabo was, et cetera, right? That's all fair. I wonder if people are doing that with Houston right now, where people are saying, okay, I think I know who Conner Weigman is, but I don't know who Boogie Johnson is, or I don't know who Rashawn Sanford or Dean Connors or Jesus Machado or whatever. I don't know who any of these guys are. What's the big deal, right? I almost wonder if that's where things are going with that, and they might be. I also think that it's nice to be the team that people tend to look past. It's certainly what Utah and Kansas State did last year. Those two programs definitely looked past Houston and wrote to losing to Houston, frankly. I also think it's interesting to look at this like these polls don't really matter a ton. They're kind of their own form of chaos in a lot of ways. They're frankly, I would argue that some of this is for you and I to talk about in the summertime. It's kind of the whole reason you have it. I do think that we hold on to these way too tightly. Like the preseason AP poll, I think, is way too valued. I almost wish there wasn't an AP poll to like week 5 or 6. We played a couple conference games because I feel like those week 0, 1, 2, 3 kind of wins get way overvalued later in the season when frankly it's not that big a deal because if we just didn't rank teams, it wouldn't have been a ranked one in the first place. I do think, though, that one thing that's kind of nice about being at the bottom, and as I think through this in my thought experiment, work with me here. If the goal is to be a story, right? If the goal is to be a program that like winning and people are paying attention to you winning, being in the middle of the conference and winning 8, 9 games is okay, good for you. Being at the top of the conference and winning 8, 9 games is at best, good for you. Being at the bottom of the conference and winning 7, 8, 9 games is a big deal, right? If you at the bottom of the polls are winning games, and if the goal is to use these polls to become a story, it's hard to argue that there's a better place to be than the bottom. I mean, I guess if you're at the top, you might be a story the day the poll comes out. But if you're at the bottom, every time you win, and I think this Houston team is going to win a lot more games than people realize, every time you win, you become the story. So when you upset Texas Tech, people say, oh my God, Houston beat Texas Tech. Whereas if you were ranked more appropriately to start the season, be like, okay, Houston, Texas Tech will call it. Those kinds of things can happen. I feel like this weirdly sets up, and maybe this is the guy who likes to tell the stories and looks at this whole thing like it's a bunch of storytelling. I weirdly feel like being at the bottom of these polls almost helps set up the storytelling element even better, right? I feel like as you look at this, that you could almost argue that you want to be in this bottom portion of the poll if you're confident you're going to be good, because people start talking about you every time you win after that, right? They might not talk about you before the season starts, and they might not talk about you in the preseason, whatever, and but once you start chipping away some of these games, you beat Colorado, you beat Baylor, you beat Tech, you move then suddenly you're the upsetting everyone, and you're making Sports Center be like, oh my God, what is Fritz doing? And that, like, people only talk about you in the positive rates. Because frankly, we're going to talk about, like I talked about on today's show, how Arizona State is overrated, how Kansas State is overrated. The teams at the top of the conference in these preseason polls would only get talked about in a negative kind of light. Whereas the bottom team, it's like, okay, actually, they held off and won some games, and this Houston team is gonna win some games, right? Look, I don't know if they win the conference. I don't know if they win 9, 10, or whatever it takes. I do think this team is a floor of a 6-6 bowl kind of team. I do think there's a real chance this team wins 7 or 8 games. I do think the Big 12 is a kind of topsy-turvy, weird conference where you don't know how many it takes to. I mean, it might only take 9 wins to win this conference. Not 9 conference wins, just 9 wins. It's a weird conference. It's very upside down, and it's very inverted, and it's preaching parity. And maybe that's why I don't, in the big picture, I do think that this indicates people don't know what they're looking at when they put Houston at 11th or worse. But maybe it's why it's not the biggest deal in the world, right? Because frankly, I do think that, if you're looking at a conference where last year the team that went 16th in the preseason Big 12 official poll won the whole thing, or if you're looking at a conference where Oklahoma State was in the conference championship game in 2023 and didn't win a conference game in 2024, although Oklahoma State did beat an SEC opponent in 2024. You're looking at, a conference where BYU, Kansas State, Iowa State, and Arizona State all have their own shot and path to the Big 12 title game in the last 10 days or whatever that was. I do think that it's okay to be the team that, hey, like this season we could get as high as 8-4, and who knows what that looks like come the end of November. And now I think that this team is really good, and I think that people are going to be surprised. Whereas if this team stays healthy, people will be surprised as to how well this team plays, how competitive this team is. But we'll be breaking that all down as it happens, because you can't break it down before it happens too terribly much. We'll spend July doing the Big 12 Media Days thing. We'll be doing a lot of work on getting ready for an exciting football season as well. We will also, for its worth, be looking at the Forever Coogs, the basketball tournament, and things of that nature. So you're going to make sure that you subscribe. You got to make sure that you hit the bell so that you know when we go live. We do post game on a TBT game or whatever. Or if there's a big time commitment recruiting, we're going to be following that as well. So keep your eyes and ears open for that. And Locked On Coogs is primarily Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every day. Go Coogs.